So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. This really does mean so much to me. I've got so many dear friends from all across the world, from Brighton to Port Louis, from Trondheim to Toronto. What a privilege. So thank you. During the confinement of lockdown, some things become unimaginable from what we knew as normal 3 months ago. And so many things, personally, socially, globally, have shifted and are still shifting. Tectonic plates of taken for grantedness are sliding, wrenching over each other, and we don't always see them coming. Sometimes we notice things. Other times the doors bang open in the high wind, catching us unaware. Disturbing, distracting, dislocating, combobulating. But this brings huge opportunities too, and if we're lucky, choice. We can choose which monuments to the past to tear down and which testaments to the future to create and commit to. But I think we have to dream too. We have to dream together. This presentation aims to bring together such stuff as dreams are made of. Autoethnographically, narratively, reflexively, this is me sharing my dreams, waking dreams, living dreams, constructions and creations of the future, joining the dots, making meaning, reference points, springboards, sound checks, depth charges, doing the needful. I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes or so. Much of it is personal, but I hope it resonates with you. I'll make reference to some key ideas, concepts and models, hooks to hang hats onto. But of course, the hats that I hang are my own. You'll have your own versions. It's likely to be a bit messy, rhizomatic perhaps, to evoke Deleuze and Guattari. It's intentional too. It's process, not product. I'll talk first about the context, our context and context now, and about how this serves to confine and define, but seemingly too, how it also serves to create resistance and growth. And I'll talk about the importance of narrative and voice, the finding and representation of these. And I'll talk about coming together, the relationality of co-creativity and leadership. Over the years, I've worked as a play worker, a physics teacher, a youth worker, an education officer, and a counsellor and psychotherapist before becoming an academic. We always have our past. How we choose to carry it around with us, what part it plays in the narrative and our becoming, is key. I hope this presentation might reflect something of what Ivor Goodson might call a story of action in the theory of context. But where are we now? What are our reference points? What's on the horizon? Our vocabulary has changed. Our working environment overlaps with our living environment to the extent the boundaries become even more confused. We don't make eye contact anymore. We can't sit around the same table. We worry we've lost our touch. We can't even make each other a cuppa. We can talk, yes. Zoom, Teams, Skype, WhatsApp, FaceTime, but it's become harder to share our vision, to dream together. But new energy and new life is emerging in spite of things, because of things. And taking a position becomes even more important. A declaration perhaps. And so what I want to explore with you, imagine with you, is our projected practices, our anticipated experiences, our dreams, and to foster a commitment to sharing, articulating and shaping together our destinies entwined. And through voicing this, breathing into this, we call our future into being. We enact a collaborative leadership. Abracadabra, we create as we speak. We got locked down. But this started way before March the 26th. The relentlessness of neoliberal performativity became mundane every day. We knew the rhetoric, we internalized their vocabulary. I remember having to look up neoliberalism. I think it's become almost meaningless now. If abracadabra is a magical incantation, a call to miracles, we've gone retroviral. We've sucked the power out of language. That's the beauty of the ugliness of the Dark Lord's Dementors suck all the hope out of us. And so this seminar is an evocation to walk together, talk together, dream together, border crossing and boundary spanning, listening with intent, letting go and flying without a safety net. Come on, feel the noise. I loved reading Philip Pullman's Northern Lights trilogy. Pullman introduces us to the concept of an individual's demon, a person's externalized manifestation of their inner self or nature in animal form. During childhood and early adolescence, your demon changes its form frequently as your mood and identity change. Before settling as an adult into an unchanging form, you become who you are. Professionally, it feels like my demon has never quite settled, unless it's some bizarre badger, beaver, bear hybrid, a platypus perhaps. In my heart, though, there is a will and commitment to support others, to help and guide them on their journey to becoming. I think this is why teaching, youth work, psychotherapy, and participatory, relationally based research have all worked for me. I live in that world of boundary spanning and border crossing, enabling and facilitating. I see the world as navigable, and whilst I rage against injustices and oppression, I'm also able to reposition myself and shapeshift as the terrain changes. This process of reselfing, to use Ida Goodson's phrase, often involves personal and collective processes of telling, relating, and recreating our stories in action, providing a means of living from the past to live in the present. This process builds our narrative capital, and this capital has the affordance of preparing us for the future. This was the focus of my doctoral research with UK youth practitioners, experiencing the seismic shifts in their professional lives from the promise of Blair's New Labour social inclusion agenda through the ravages of Cameron's austerity cuts. And with the UK Troops to Teachers programme, as Christopher sought to serve again, making the move from battleship commander to primary school teacher. The portrayals explored in these two studies point towards ways we might re-envisage a future, imagining ourselves in moments yet to come. Of course, at times we may feel we have no agency here, no power, no professionalism. And that's when we might know that the Dementors have touched our shoulder. So arising from these studies, and again acknowledging a huge debt to Ivor Goodson and the canon of knowledge he gives us, the central thesis developed here relates to the power of the individual practitioner's narrative capital as a resource for their personalised professionalism, their engagement in the work, and for their respective future professional development. This model embodies several key dimensions which are offered to you for further consideration and interrogation. The two studies evidence the affordance of narrative capital in anticipating, supporting, and facilitating future identity and professionality, whilst drawing on and building on prior experience and developed sense of self. The portrayals constructed reflect a process of transitional development, as the narrator explores shifts between liminal states and spaces, creating a narrative which offers a vehicle for further self-development. Analysis of the portrayals through specific methodological lenses of extended semi-structured narrative interviews developed further through an exchange of shared reflections and analyses reveals a co-constructional process. The constructed narratives are formed and reformed, extrapolated and validated through repeated internal and external dialogue. The opportunities for telling and retelling one's professional life story build and model one's narrative capital. Participants across the two studies identified that the most significant area of impact of experience, particularly in relation to feelings of self-worth and agency and autonomy, arose from this sense of being professional, supported in significant professional relationships, the faith that significant others have in them as practitioners, and their heightened experiences of effective professional. We need someone to believe in us. Through telling their story, the practitioners are able to assert their identity and claim a personalised professional topography. In developing narrative capital, a sense of narrative weight is developed. This can act as ballast, leverage and potential momentum, but it can also potentially lead to lethargy, inertia and paralysis. Our narrative capital can weigh us down. As such, we need to exercise our narratives. Take them out to play, turn them over, add mulch to the roots or grist to the mill. The dynamic quality of narrative development also creates the potential for energy to be created and to be released through the narrative formation and reformation process. Assumptions, positions and values and paradigms which underpin narratives become entwined with our identity and self-concept. Hence, when the narrator gives voices to internalised conflict, this process can be uncomfortable or psychologically until a point of paradigmic shift occurs, accompanied by a release of emotional energy and potential for potential growth or realignment. So rather than developing portfolio or bricolage careers or professional identities, the development and affordances of narrative capital point towards and support a state of ever-evolving becoming. Not only is it important that practitioners' narrative affords a sense of integration and self-belief, but given the volatility of the professional field and the broader neoliberalist landscape, practitioners tell their professional life stories as a way of positioning and repositioning themselves for and in the future. These narrative encounters, these co-constructions, embody processes of intersubjectification. What happens? What happens when I think of you as part of me? Or when we each take possession as part of ourselves, the spaces between us, or indeed them? What happens when I open myself up to experiencing your position as if it were my own? How can I convey and proliferate a culture of mutual recognition as a foundation for social understanding? Education, learning, development are all relational activities. We co-create our lived and our lived experiences. To truly become expansive, transformative learners and teachers, I would claim demands a level of conscious intersubjectification. We should be prepared to loosen our grip on our egos, our security blankets, whilst wearing our hearts on our sleeves. We have to get ready to rumble, to be passionate, and to get messy. This process of intersubjectification requires a re-examination of the way we engage with others. We see relational engagement, whether it be as colleagues, in supervision, Liz, Karen, Nikki, as co-researchers, as shifting from a transactional engagement to one that is framed in terms of interaction. We hold our values with clarity. We commit to open engagement and collaboration without necessarily knowing or demanding a predetermined outcome. And we loosen our narratives. We think together. But this process is not just laissez-faire carelessness. We listen intentionally and empathetically and respond, building on the other. This co-creative process is not one of subjugation, but rather the process of interaction, exploring and creating a shared vision, a future in potential. This is a co-constructive process. We think of the concept of agency as the capability to act, to take action and effect change, as well as being central to tenet to the personal freedom and liberty. Agency has been considered core to notions of professionality, the responsibility to act independently within specific, critical, professional contexts, whilst abiding to a framework of professional ethics and duty. This is what being an academic is all about. Hux and Vangen outline the advantages and affordances and moral imperative of collaboration, particularly in public services. And this points towards an understanding of how collaborative agency might offer a dynamic, creative model for working beyond the individual, to think in and act from a co-construction framework for public good, a gestalt where the whole, as a capability to affect change, is different from, potentially greater than, and certainly more inclusive than the sum of the parts. This is at the heart of social action. Of course, agency has to be considered and mediated with an understanding of social structure. Those factors, such as social class, gender and sexuality, ethnicity, ability, culture, etc., that influence and determine or limit our decisions and our capability to act. Hence, an understanding of how structural power mediates within this is key, and the work of Bourdieu and Foucault and others frame this understanding. Here we consider this relational interdependence, and from this an emerging intersubjective agency, a willingness to bring the confluence of all our life and social experiences, meanings and narratives into a shared space, coming to know the space for the first time, through being open and understanding to being understood, trusting that out of this, something new will become. The dialogical space requires a continuous, conscious, collaborative flow, or a dance between explored and shared values and identity, power, performance or enactment, and agency and responsibility. Lynn Norton and Yvonne Sleep provide this model when exploring the dialogical space within life history narrative encounters. As we commit to collaboration, we might see this flow between these elements as consciously touching base with each, with intent. Here we consider this relational interdependence, and from this an emerging intersubjective agency, a willingness to bring the confluence of all our life and social experiences, meanings and narratives into a shared space. Something new will become. And this process demands a commitment to openness, patience and suspension of judgment, negotiating and renegotiating accountability and responsibility, developing and maintaining a shared vision of learning together, learning and leading together. And can I just acknowledge the most amazing experience I've had recently of working with the Mauritius team on this. It's a sad but necessary indictment that the old leadership has become solid. So where do we turn to now for leadership? To the young and to the visionary, to the energetic and to the principled. So let's not pretend it's been tough. And for some, incredibly so, incredibly so. People of my age have got a bit flabby. Surely, as the doors begin to open and we shift between and in between new days and new ways, we have to think leaner, dream clearer, trust the young, attune to their energy and intent, their voice. Voice matters. Couldry asserts voice does more than value particular voices or acts of speaking. It values all human beings' ability to give account of themselves. It values my and your status as narratable selves. And I would assert, out of the heteroglossia, we have to claim space and time for qualitative transformations, for flows and shifts of multiple desires. I've often told my research students to keep an eye out for that key source, that killer paper that's published the week before your dissertation, before your thesis is due in. And I'm grateful to Sue Storrock for pointing me to Jessica Riddle's excellent article published online only a few days ago. Riddle identifies two narratives prevalent in academic leadership in COVID times. She writes, positivity promises us that everything is going to be fine. We are reassured that life will be back to normal in no time, that our institutions can pivot seamlessly to online learning delivery without diluting student experiences. We just have to stick together and look for the silver linings. We are encouraged to shelter in place so that we can be back to business as usual and look back on this global pandemic with a twinge of nostalgia for pajama pants and pandemic puppies. But critical hope acknowledges the world as we know is rapidly changing. We ask ourselves how we might remake the post-COVID-19 world to be more just, equitable and inclusive, that our institutions cannot pivot easily and move to online learning delivery. And that changes the relationship we have with our students and threatens our ability to connect in meaningful ways. We have to double down on collaboration and community, just as we understand that silver linings are not always afforded to the most vulnerable and marginalised populations. We are willing to open ourselves up to imagine a new model of education that moves us into the future that is better than our present and more humane than our past. Our narrative threatens to break us apart because it denies the fact of our transformation. The other narrative, the first, offers us a way to be broken apart, to occupy the position of the learner, to embrace sympathy and to relinquish authority in place of collaboration with our students, our colleagues and our communities. We have to choose critical hope. We have to. My thesis then is one of principled, intentional, relational futuring. There are big skies out there. We have to be prepared to tell our truths, reveal our intentions, share our stories, build our collective narrative capital. What form of education do we want? What processes will we develop? What practices best embody these principles and processes? What quality of leadership gives us this? What future will we create if we dream together? Thank you.